All right, athlete, let's talk about one of the essential movements that every human being needs to be able to do. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're a human, you need to be able to do this. Doesn't matter if you're man, woman, young, old, doesn't matter. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the deadlift. So the deadlift is this motion where we lean forward and we grab something that's on the floor and then we stand up with it, right? And all of us as human beings, we're designed to be able to do that. Right? We all have the joints and the muscles and the capacity to be able to do that and to actually lift up some really heavy things. It's amazing what the human body is capable of, especially when we train it and we teach it how to do that really, really well, right? And there's this exercise in the world of fitness, it's called the deadlift, and the deadlift is, again, it's practicing lifting something from the floor, right? It's an essential movement that everybody needs to be able to do. But here's the deal. When people hear the word deadlift, especially if you've got some experience in the world, in the gym, like in the world of weightlifting, you might be like, oh my goodness, so many people hurt their back doing a deadlift. And you're right, that is kind of a scary movement for a lot of people, but there's a reason for that. If you don't know how to do this right, if you're not good at it, if you don't have a strong core, and we're going to talk about what that means because that's really, really important. We have to really define that and figure out what that means. If you don't have a strong core, the chances of you getting hurt are very high, right? So we have to really make sure that you understand how to do this well. And when you practice it and do it well and you develop your strength, the chances of you getting hurt in your everyday life is almost zero. You know, we want you to be able to walk up confidently to whatever it is, whether it's a kid, a grandkid, a box in the garage, a pen on the floor, it doesn't matter. We want you to be able to walk up to that thing, have the utmost level of confidence that you're not gonna hurt yourself when you pick that thing up, right? And that's what we wanna talk about. So one of the thing I wanna focus on, because there's a lot here, right? It's a pretty complex movement. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm admittedly a little bit of a biomechanics nerd, so you have to kind of bear with me a little bit, but one of the things I wanna focus on is the spine and the pelvis. Okay, so when we're going to pick something up from the floor, especially when we're picking up something, some sort of weight, right? Like whenever we're going to load the system, we want to make sure that the spine and the pelvis is organized. And let me just kind of tie this into core strength. Core strength is your ability to organize the spine and pelvis as you create different movements and shapes in the extremities. Whoa, that's a lot, right? It's a lot to bite into. So again, I'll say it again. The core strength is your ability to maintain structural stability through the spine and the pelvis while you create motions and positions in the extremities. The hips, the knees, the ankles, the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, like that's where movement should occur, right? In the spine and the pelvis, in this particular movement, we want to create stabilization. So let's talk about this. So first of all, let's look at the spine and the pelvis, right? And let's do a side view. So I'm going to draw the spine. So we'll say this is the head, and then you've got all these, this would be a very crude drawing, right? But we've got all these vertebrae, these are bones, right? And there's a stack of them. And then in between each of these bones is a disc. Right? So if we're looking from the side, there's some S-curve here. So this is a very crude drawing, but bear with me. So we're looking from the side, we've got these stacked up real nice, right? We consider this to be a neutral spine. Like when I'm standing here with a good posture position, I'm in a neutral position, okay? And then this goes into what's called a sacrum. A sacrum is what makes up part of our pelvis, right? So we'll just say that's the pelvis. And then at the bottom of the pelvis, we've got the leg bone. Right? That's the femur, the upper thigh. And then we got a lower leg, and then we got a foot here, right? So this is what your body looks like. And there's a shoulder blade back here, which is where the arm hangs off, right? So that's really, in essence, this is exactly what that structure looks like. Exactly. Maybe not exactly. So when we're talking about core strength, when we're talking about this particular movement, we want to create movement in the knee, in the hip. This is the hip joint where the leg goes up into the pelvis, the knee joints, and then also the ankle joint. That's where the movement is going to occur, which means that everything above that, none of this should move. This should stay stable, right? So what would that look like if we were to hinge forward? Or what should that look like if we were to hinge forward? All right, so now we've got, let's say this is the pelvis here. Whoops. Here's the pelvis, right? Here's the hip joint. Here's the leg, the upper leg. Here's the lower leg. Here's the foot, like so. So here's our joints, knee, ankle, and hip. And then we've got this spine, right? My wonderful drawing. Right, so we got all these things stacked up real nice. We got a real nice straight line, right? All the way through. See that? So now when we're talking about the deadlift, where is the movement occurring, right? It's occurring, we're hinging at this hip joint. So then what is managing, or what is keeping all of these bones from just going into falling into this shape? What's preventing those bones from just leaning forward? Like if your head was here, right, and your pelvis was here, and if this was your shape, right? Which one looks stronger and more stable? This one, of course, right? So what is it that's holding that structure? Well, we've got all of these muscles. There's muscles that connect all of these things together, and there's lots of them, right? And they're stabilizing muscles. There's some real big ones on top of this, but underneath the bigger ones are all these small stabilizers. And all of those muscles, it's their job to stabilize that spine and the pelvis as you create these movements in these other joints. Right? So if these muscles are weak or they're not doing what they're supposed to, when you lean forward, gravity just kind of folds that over. And if you think about it, you've got all these discs in between, right? They're like jelly donuts. And if you're in this shape here, it squeezes the front of the jelly donut, so then that jelly could potentially squeeze out the back. And that's where, again, we run into a lot of problems with back pain, all kinds of stuff when we get into these really, really bad positions. So when you're able to lean forward without any movement of the spine and the pelvis, all the load gets put in the hip, the knee, and the ankle, right? We're putting the movement in these joints here, and we're transferring the load. Like if the arm is hanging down, you're picking something up, right? We're transferring that load down this steel rod down into this joint here, where you get these gluteal muscles and these hamstring muscles, right? And those muscles are what's going to create that movement to lift that spine and that pelvis up to get you standing up nice and tall, right? Now, does that mean that these muscles aren't doing anything? Right? Because I think that's kind of a misconception sometimes. Like I always hear this thing, I make sure that you lift with your arm, with your legs, not with your back. So I just want to kind of dispel that just a little bit. And it sort of depends on what we're really talking about here. But when I hear that, there's always going to be muscle activation in the back, right? So you're always using your back. Anytime I lean forward, my back muscles turn on. And if I'm going to grab something, even if my spine is neutral, if I grab something, those muscles are going to stay on, right? So I might feel like I'm using my back. And the only reason you might feel like that is because those muscles are on. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think it scares a lot of people. When they feel that tension back there, it can be a little bit scary, right? But we actually want tension. We want these muscles to be engaged kind of tension. We want the muscles to be on and holding. You'll feel tension here as well, but the muscles are not engaged anymore. The muscles have just let go. They've stretched out, they've elongated. They're no longer holding anymore. They've like a rubber band, they've been stretched, right? So we need engagement. So you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it. But again, where the problem comes in is if you're in this shape and we've got movement within each of these joints, right? Because imagine when this person stands up, now that spine has to extend, everything has to go back to neutral as I'm standing. So now we've got all kinds of instability, all kinds of movement there, just because the core, and what am I talking about the core? The core is really all of the muscles that go around the structure, right? We got all those low back muscles, we have muscles on the sides, we have muscles on the front, we have muscles all around this structure to be able to maintain stabilization, okay? So that's the shape that we're looking for. Here are where the movements are occurring or should be occurring, right? And I did put he's leaned over quite a bit here, just because I made his legs really, really short. But technically, let me just erase this, and I'm going to draw this just to give you a little better sense of what this should look like. So we're just going to go to the basic stick figures. So we're going to go like this, shoulder, this, here is the weight, here is head, okay? And everybody's angles are going to look a little bit different. If I've got longer legs, for example, I might look a little bit more like this, and a shorter torso. There might be a little bit more of a lean forward there. See that? How the shapes change? I didn't do that good of a job, but it really just depends on the person, right? The legs are longer, the femur's longer. There, like so. That's better, okay? But here's one of the most important things. When you're doing the deadlift, one of the ways to make sure that this stays as a straight line, right? To make sure that that structure stays stable is to make sure that you're also stable at the foot. Okay, so imagine like if we're building a house, the strength of the structure is only as strong as the foundation, right? If the foundation is built on sand, or if there is no foundation, right, then everything up above is going to be a little bit shaky. And that's exactly what happens. So if you don't have your feet anchored into the ground, if you don't have a good connection to the ground, it can affect the muscle, the control of that center area, right? And one of the beautiful things about this exercise we call the deadlift is we use a barbell in most cases, and we can put the barbell right over the middle of that base of support, right? The base of support for the human, right, when we're standing up, is of course feet on the floor. So that's our base, this is our foundation. We want to put the weight over the middle of that foundation, because imagine if the weight is out here, you're going to come up on your toes, right? You're going to be trying to balance on your toes. That's unstable, and that could affect the structural stability of your core, of your center, right? Of your center, right? Which could cause different problems. So always get that bar right over the middle of the foot. Make sure that your angles are right, and hopefully you understand now what it means to have a stable core, a strong core. Now, one more little thing here. So when we're talking about the shape of the spine, we've got three different shapes here, right? Just broadly, we've got this, we call it a flexed spine, right? So if that's head and here's pelvis, that would be flexed. We have a neutral spine. If here's pelvis, here's spine, here's head, that's neutral. And then we've got a hyperextended spine, which would look something like this, like that. So there's the connection between spine and pelvis is that little dot right there. And what we're looking for is this right here. This is neutral. So when we're lifting weights, when we're lifting heavy stuff, the strongest position for spine and pelvis is going to be neutral. We don't want hyperextension. We don't want flexion. We want neutral. And we have to train your muscles to maintain that neutral spine, no matter what you're doing. We're just talking about it in a context of a deadlift, but it could be a squat, could be a press, could be a pull-up, could be all kinds of different things. You want to be able to really understand what's happening with that with that system. And the more you learn that system and the more you strengthen that system, the less likely you are to have any sort of weird injuries, but also it just enhances your performance. And just about everything. The stronger we can make your center, the better everything else works, right? All the extremities just work better when your center structure is super, super strong. So there it is. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, let me know. But there it is. There's how you build a strong core in a deadlift.